Oh, everything is so slow.
Oh, it started. It's showing now.
Okay, perfect. All right, Vanda, I'm going to hand over to you. Okay, guys, enjoy, and then I'll catch up with you next week. No, wait, next week there's no lecture. There's a break.
A week
We'll
after.
catch you the week after. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Bridget. Bye.
Bye.
Good evening, everybody. So another lecture with me. So this is going to be Skincare 3. If you have any questions, please stop me in the middle of the presentation. I have no problem with that whatsoever. It makes it a little bit more interactive as well, and it doesn't feel like I'm just talking to an empty screen. Okay. So Skincare 3, this is part of your notes. We are going to define what a cosmetic product is. You'll understand the difference between cosmetic and medicinal claims, understand the factors that affect the skin, aging, anti-aging products, sweating, antiperspirants, flaking skin, and anti-dandruff products. So we're focusing more on the products itself rather than the cause of this. Recognize different active ingredients. We're going to be talking a lot about ingredients today, and understanding controlled release topical formulations as well. Okay, so as biotechnology developed and new raw material technologies are able to affect the physiological change, cosmetics chemists have provided more and better solutions to skincare problems. A better scientific method for evaluating the effects of skincare products has furnished the proof of efficacy required to help eradicate the guesswork of the past. I mean, there are a lot of methodologies out there for testing specific claims on products as well. So, and also greater consumer awareness of products and their efficacy, together with an increased competitiveness in the market, has expanded the need for product differentiation. I mean, you can look at TikTok, Google, Facebook, Instagram, all of these things. There's really a lot of awareness and a lot of influencers making videos about things. So the consumer they want more information, they want more sophistication. And as the level of sophistication and activity of raw materials used in the cosmetic industry continuously moves closer to the pharmaceuticals, a greater need for ensuring consumer safety has emerged. So this is resulting in stricter legislation as well as claim support requirements. So you can't say your product does X, Y, and Z if you can't prove that your product does X, Y, and Z. And all this taking into account that you're not claiming that your product is doing something that's actually medicinal. So that brings us to the definition of a cosmetic product. So a cosmetic product is any substance or preparation that's placed in contact with external parts of the human body. So this is your epidermis, hair system, nails, lips, and external genital organs, or the teeth and the mucous membranes of the oral cavity, so your toothpaste and your mouthwashes, with the exclusive view, or mainly, to clean, perfume, change appearance, correcting body odors, and or protecting them or keeping them in good condition. So important: clean, perfume, protect, changing the appearance. So changing the appearance like makeup products, so you're putting mascara on or blusher, that kind of changing of appearance. Keeping or correcting is for the purpose of the moment keeping or correcting is for the purpose of treating or preventing disease. That's when you are moving into your more medicinal type of claims. Okay, so there's another summary, because it's very, very, very important that you know this. Clean, perfume, change appearance, correct body odor, protect, and keep in good condition. Those are the only things cosmetics can do. Okay. Field of application: epidermis, hair, nails, external genital organs, teeth, mucous membranes of the oral cavity. So this is just a summary of what we were talking about. Now, to understand the difference, here's the definition of a medicine. So this is any mixture of a substance used or purporting to be suitable for use, or manufactured or sold for use in the diagnosis, treatment, mitigation, modification. So you can see these medicinal kind of things, or prevention of disease, abnormal physical or mental state, or the symptoms thereof. So restoring, correcting, modifying any somatic or psychic or organic function in man, and includes any veterinary medicine as well. Any claim that a product has a corrective function, therefore, is considered to be a medicinal claim and makes the product liable for registration as a medicine. So it's very, very important that when you claim something on your cosmetic product, that you don't infringe on any medicinal claims, because it can be taken off the market and they will send you to have it tested and scheduled with the medicines. Okay. So in order to in order to have a product on the market, you have to clarify the status of a product as a cosmetic. So it must fulfill only the definition of a cosmetic. It must only contain ingredients that are allowed for use in cosmetics at the stipulated concentration. And an example of this is, for instance, vitamin A. So if you're using vitamin A as a cosmetic ingredient, your maximum allowed concentration is 0.3%. The moment you go over 0.3% for vitamin A, it has to be registered as a medicine, because that becomes more of something that will be prescribed by a dermatologist. Okay, so be very careful about the ingredients and the concentration at which you are using your ingredients. It must not make any medicinal claims, like we said, so it must not claim to treat any medical condition, use any medical terminology, or infringe on any call-up notice to the Act 101 that I just read for you a couple of slides ago. So companies should also strive to design artwork and packaging that clarifies the product's status as a cosmetic. And I know there's this huge movement of making things look more pharmaceutical. You're putting it in a syringe, it looks all beautiful. That is a very, very gray area where you're starting to make your cosmetic look like a medicine. Okay, so be very careful of that. And this is also when you move into the category, and I know one of you is going to ask this question, is what about cosmeceuticals? Okay. Firstly, there's no such thing as cosmeceuticals. You're either a cosmetic product or you're a medicinal product. You can't be both. And you have to clarify that your cosmetic product is indeed a cosmetic product and define it as such very clearly to the consumer. Okay. So when you've got advertising claims, your basic product judgment for assessing cosmetic advertising claims must consider if the claims made are in a cosmetic context. So this is just some questions that you can ask about your claims. So does it have a temporary action? In other words, so the moment you stop using your product, it's going to stop working. So you have this anti-aging product and it's plumping up the skin and it's making the wrinkles look like it's all going away. And the moment you stop the product, the wrinkles are back. Okay, that means it's still a cosmetic product, because the action is only temporary. Your skin will revert back to its original condition once you stop the use of the product. Does it improve the appearance of the skin? You can also say yes to this question. Does it treat a disease? If you are treating a disease, it's no longer a cosmetic product, so your answer has to be no. Must it be used regularly to maintain the effect? Yes, it's still a cosmetic product. So this is, for instance, if you have acne skin. So you're using your anti-acne product, the skin's appearance is looking great, but the moment you stop using that product, the acne comes back. Okay, so you need to use it regularly in order to maintain the effect. Okay, that's just a simple example. Obviously, there are other reasons why people have acne, so just see it as a simple example. Okay, is the effect aimed at grooming and enhancing the appearance of the skin's texture? Yes, it's still a cosmetic. So skin texture is affecting the very top layer of the skin. So it's not actually penetrating. So that means it's still a cosmetic product. Does it have any healing or curative effects? Okay, if it does, it's no longer cosmetic, then it becomes a medicinal. Also, remember, that's why it's in red over there, any claims related to eczema, psoriasis, melasma are all medicinal claims. So you can't have a cosmetic product and tell people this will help with your eczema or psoriasis, because then it's no longer a cosmetic product. Okay. Can be used on sensitive skin is probably a better claim, but also remember, the moment you use that, you need to prove that your product isn't going to sensitize the skin or cause any sensitivity in the skin. Okay. So there's just some advertising claims. So evens and illuminates skin tone, restores youthful complexion, visible results in just 1 week. That's an interesting one. Smooths and textures and reveals radiance. accelerated retinol, reduces wrinkle and fine lines, tested on sensitive skin, improves skin radiance. These are all claims that you have to prove. If you're going to say that your product is restoring youthful complexion, you need to have the proof for that. Okay, so we're going to talk about some products as well. We're going to talk about antiperspirants, anti-dandruff agents, anti-aging products as well. But we'll start off with the anti-aging product. So last week we talked about the factors that cause skin aging, and this is intrinsic or chronological aging, actinic aging from UV damage or pollution or environmental change, your lifestyle, stress, smoking, alcohol, all of that has an effect on your skin. And symptoms of aging is the increase in production of your ROSs, your reactive oxygen species. And this is all associated with irritation as well. When you have an increase in production of reactive oxygen species, you will have an increase in skin irritation or skin sensitivity. Depolymerization of the skin's natural biopolymers and possibly the onset of skin cancers, slowing of cell proliferation. So the skin actually grows at a slower rate. When you're young and you're a teenager, the skin grows nice and fast, you're healing nice and quickly. But when you get older, that starts to slow down. You also have a decrease or degeneration of the levels of collagen and its synthesis in the skin. And that's why a lot of your anti-aging products target collagen production. Epidermal thinning, the skin becomes thinner. Your increase in transepidermal water loss. So the skin becomes drier. Changes in the skin's rheology, in other words, its elastic property. So it stretches, but it doesn't necessarily go back to its original starting position. A lot of pigmentation disorders like hyper and hypopigmentation. I'm sure you've all heard about age spots. Reduction of oxygen supply to the skin, because as we age, we actually reduce the amount of your circulation starts to slow down. So you get the reduction of oxygen supply. Mitosis, we've already mentioned. You've got a slowing of your cell proliferation. Your skin grows a lot slower. Okay, that's just a little diagram of the differences between a young skin and an older skin, where the collagen actually loses its integrity. Okay. So vital skin functions was hydration, nutrition, oxygenation, protection, and revitalization. So when you're looking at anti-aging products, those are kind of the things that you want to have your anti-aging product to target. Okay. Transient anti-aging treatments, as many of your so-called anti-aging applications of topically applied materials, are nothing more than transient. Okay, so in other words, they have a hydration or moisturizing effect, so they have like this plumping effect on the skin, and that succeed in the reducing of the prominence of undesirable surface defects and blemishes. So you're keeping the skin a little bit more hydrated, and it starts to look a lot better. Okay, but it's just a change of your dermal losses, and it's a very temporary effect. So the moment you take the product away, the aging or the wrinkles will come back. Okay, so a very popular ingredient here will be, for instance, hyaluronic acid, especially a low molecular weight hyaluronic acid that penetrates a little bit deeper into the skin, and it takes moisture with it, and it draws moisture into it and holds the moisture there, and you get this plumping effect of the skin. Okay, but the moment you stop using it, that your body will naturally remove those sort of ingredients. It grows out to the top of the skin, and then you have this loss again, and your skin will revert back to normal. Okay, your true anti-aging treatments are products that require a return to the normal regeneration degenerative balance. In other words, that the skin is able to regenerate at the same rate as it's degenerating. Okay, so increasing your collagen and elastin fiber synthesis is what you kind of want in this situation, because as you're aging, your skin is producing less collagen and elastin. Okay, so they also maintain the delicate balance between antioxidants and reactive oxygen species formed by the body. Okay, so you kind of want to bring the skin right back into balance. So you've got enough antioxidants to counteract the reactive oxygen species. You are regenerating your collagen and elastin fibers. And some group of topical applied substances with the potential for this is vitamin A, a very popular one, retinol, and also alpha hydroxy acid. So alpha hydroxy acids is like your lactic acid, glycolic acid. That's those sort of ingredients. So a healthy body will generate reactive oxygen species as daily as a normal body process. It's a way to protect the skin against bacteria or foreign bodies. And the immune system produces these free radicals to create this hostile environment so that you basically prevent bacteria from growing. The reactive oxygen species also produced by environmental insults such as smog, cigarette smoke, certain drugs, alcohol, and UV radiation as well. They damage the lipids and the proteins in the skin, and this is what's depleting the natural antioxidants and free radical control system. And when you damage these lipids in the skin, you also have a greater loss of moisture from the skin. You're affecting your transepidermal water loss. Antioxidants neutralize these free radicals and reduce their damaging effect. The characteristic histologic cell and the biological changes of the extracellular matrix observed in photoaging may relate to the effects of reactive oxygen species on the quantitative and qualitative changes in collagen and elastin. Okay, so you want to neutralize these reactive oxygen species before it starts adding to the degeneration of your collagen and elastin, before it starts reducing your DNA's ability to help with the growth or the making of the collagen and the elastin. And reactive oxygen species also promotes the cross-linking of collagen and then the degeneration. Excuse me. So there are several ways of achieving moisturization in skin. So it's often combined in emulsions. And the reason we use emulsions is because with emulsion, you can have your oil and your occlusive materials and your emollients. You can have both in one product because your emollients are generally your oil-based products, and then you can have some humectants in your water phase as well. So a thin film of occlusive material makes the skin feel smooth and soft. So that's just leaving a little bit of something behind on the skin that makes this layer, and it prevents your transepidermal water loss. And this helps to rehydrate the skin, to increase the water content of the stratum corneum. It also has the ability to fill cracks in the stratum corneum. So if you have very dry, rough skin and you're applying a very rich moisturizing cream onto your hands, it immediately feels softer and better because it's kind of gluing down those protruding corneocytes. And examples of occlusive material are petroleum jelly and mineral oil. Those are the ones that are most widely used, especially in your mass market products. I know these days people want to move away from those, and they are moving to your grapeseed oils, jojoba oils, castor oils, your more natural kind of products. So when used alone, these materials are aesthetically unsatisfactory due to their feel. I mean, applying a straight mineral oil to your skin, it feels oily. You're not going to want to type or touch anything. So if you're mixing it into an emulsion, that actually helps to make the product feel better, and you don't end up with this oily feel on the skin, but you're still getting the benefit of the oil that's in the emulsion that's applied to the skin. So humectants, this is hygroscopic materials that can draw water into the stratum corneum. Like I told you before, hyaluronic acid is a very popular one. So application of humectants decrease transepidermal water loss. Sodium lactate, urea. Urea is often used in food care products. It's a very cheap ingredient. It's very easy to use, and it helps to draw moisture into your heels or your feet. Sorbitol, glycerine, and propylene glycols are also widely used. So the important thing to note here is when you have low relative humidity, these materials will not just absorb moisture from the atmosphere, but they will also absorb moisture from the lower layers of the skin. So be very careful about the climate of the place that you are going to send your cosmetic product. Is your product actually designed to be active in that sort of weather conditions? So you're not going to give someone a product with a high amount of humectants and they're living in a very dry area in the middle of the desert where there's almost no moisture in there, okay, because it will actually dry their skin more. Okay, then volatile oils, they effectively reduce viscosity of the product. They also impart a bit of a cooling effect because it evaporates and it leaves this thin film behind on the skin. That's also effective moisturizing the skin. Volatile oils also change the feel of your product. So you can play around with your volatiles and your non-volatiles to get a specific feel in your product. Then hydrophilic matrices like your hyaluronic acid, colloidal oatmeal is another good one, act as a type of blanket which provides protection as well as moisture on the skin. And you'll notice when you're using a product with, you know, a high concentration of either hyaluronic or colloidal oatmeal, you apply it, and after the product is dried, you can actually, you can feel that little bit of a cushion effect, or that you know, layer that it makes on the skin. It's not a bad kind of layer, it just feels nice, so the skin feels like it's protected. Then natural additives like fruit and vegetable extracts, vitamins and amino acids, also often used for anti-aging products. A lot of there are so many like radiance boosting, anti-wrinkle kind of products in the market that's derived from fruits and vegetables, or even plants and plankton and all sorts of interesting stuff. So special additives can also be used, like your proteins. Proteins, also your peptides, your hexapeptides, your pentapeptides, all of those very good anti-aging ingredients. Fatty acids, because fatty acids help to improve your barrier function of the skin, so it reduces moisture loss. Alpha hydroxy acids, like I mentioned before. Liposomes and ceramides as well. Also to note that liposomes and ceramides also help with your barrier repair, prevents transepidermal water loss. So again, moisturizing. So if you're doing an anti-aging product, it's very important that you moisturize the skin, you keep the skin hydrated, because by doing that, you are already improving the skin's appearance. Okay, so next we're going to move to antiperspirant and deodorant products. So in our first lecture, we discussed the difference between acrine and apocrine sweat glands. So this is just a little summary of that. And you will remember that your acrine sweat glands, those are the glands that are smaller and they release water and some salts and lactic acid. And this is the sweat for thermal control. Or your apocrine sweat is a much larger gland. So this is in the axillae, nipples, and anogenital area. So this is the one that releases the proteins, the lipids, the salts, the carbohydrates. So the one that causes body malodor, and the one that's active after puberty. So it's under hormonal control. Okay. So acrine sweat production is activated by thermal stimuli, obviously because it's part of your thermal control. You're sweating to reduce your body temperature. And it starts with the transportation of sodium ions from the outside to the inside of the secretory coil. So it's causing this osmotic pressure with the sodium ions inside the coil, thereby drawing water into this coil so that the water can actually move up in the proximal duct, where it can be released on the top of on the skin. And you all know, when you've been like very active and you run a marathon, or you know, I think for some of us that are not as fit after 5 kilometers, sweat smells salty. It's from the sodium ions that you can actually smell on the skin. Okay, the concentration of ions in the secretion increases with the rate of sweating. So the more you sweat, the more you are releasing these ions. Okay, and that's also why they tell you when you're running a far distance, you need to drink some electrolytes. You need to put those electrolytes back into your body because you're sweating all of them out. Okay, and this because there's also less available time for the reabsorption of these ions. Okay, so the wall of the proximal duct is permeable to the sodium ions, so that it can actually be drawn back into the dermis and not released with the water. And that's why when you have this increase in sweating, you know, these ions are not being absorbed back, and then it's released on the top of the skin as well. Okay, so the remaining water rises up the distal duct, spills out into the dermis via the spiral duct, and then you get evaporation and cooling down. Okay, so remember, this is what it looks like with your secretory coil there at the bottom, where you've got the release of your sodium ions and water going into this coil, and it's going up the duct, and then you get some reabsorption of your water as well as your sodium chloride. Okay. Okay, so how do we inhibit this? So the mechanism is not fully understood, but I can tell you that if you are going to Google search it, which I hope that you do Google search these things, because it kind of helped the learning process. you will get the keratin plug theory mostly. So this is a partial closure of the sweat ducts due to the actives of the antiperspirant binding to the keratin, and it forms this little plug, but it's a very temporary thing, and this little plug will actually break down also. Then there's the leaky hose mechanism. This is the alteration of your sweat duct permeability by metallic salts, causing the sweat to diffuse into the dermal tissue instead of onto the skin. So it's actually pushing the water back into the skin. There's also the interruption of your neurological input to the sweat gland by the metallic ions of the active salts. And then the reversal of the sweat flow by the creation of a strong positive charge on the skin surface. So that's kind of like same as the leaky hose one. And then presence of aluminium ions on the skin surface, reversing the polarity of the sweat duct. And the moment you reverse the polarity, you'll have the absorption of water instead of the release thereof. And the superficial seal, the formation of a totally inert gel by the active salts that forms this occlusive seal. So almost similar to your keratin plug scenario as well. But I mean, I'm sure you've all had an antiperspirant on your hand, and you can feel how it literally dries out the skin, like it's just sucking up all of that moisture. Okay, so antiperspirants actively reduce the amount of your underarm perspiration. I know if you've got what is the word, hyperhydration, is it hyperhydration? I'm going to lie to you now, but anyway, when you have excessive sweating, so some people sweat and an increased amount, that's abnormal amount. So a dermatologist will often tell you, okay, let's start with an antiperspirant. You apply an antiperspirant cream to your hands and to your feet to try and negate that. And if that doesn't work, they might actually go for Botox injections or something else to do with the nerve endings to try and stop this excessive sweating from happening. Okay, but antiperspirants are generally very effective in doing this. And if you think about this, the body normally secretes 1 to 2 liters of eccrine sweat per day. No amount of antiperspirant is going to prevent all of that sweat from happening. And you don't want it either. You need the body needs to cool itself down. So you need to actually sweat. So the control of eccrine sweating is achieved through the use of astringent metal salts. This is your aluminium chloride, which is a very commonly, aluminium chlorohydrate is your very commonly used one. And then aluminium zirconium tetrachlorohydrate, also a very nice one to use, actually very effective. And then I've also got aluminium chloride and aluminium formate listed there. So like I said, total inhibition is neither necessary nor desirable. So I don't know if any of you ever watched 1,000 Ways to Die, where they actually had this person that painted themselves in this latex, there we go, that's the word, in this latex kind of paint, and it covered their entire body, including their face. Okay, so they went to some sort of costume party, and they actually ended up dying because of the body couldn't sweat. And because it couldn't sweat, it couldn't cool down. And I mean, that latex was literally covering the entire body. So the person was starting to overheat and they eventually died. So it's very important to note that you don't want to stop sweating completely. And that's why you will use your antiperspirant under the arms. You know, you don't necessarily use it over your entire body. Okay, then we're going to move to deodorants. So in 1880, Mum launched a zinc oxide as an active ingredient in a cream base. Now, zinc oxide is still used if you go to your more natural kind of deodorants. In the early 1890s, your first aluminium-containing antiperspirant based on aluminium chloride solution was brought out, but it had a pH of between 2.5 and 3, and this caused skin irritation as well as fabric disintegration. So people's shirts on tops and dresses were starting to disintegrate where they applied this antiperspirant. In the 1940s, they introduced this self-buffered aluminium chlorohydrate that has a pH of 4. And this is less irritating and it's causing less fabric destruction, and it's safe and effective for the underarm area. Again, it's still used very widely today. One that's gaining a lot of popularity now is your aluminium zirconium chlorohydrate. Okay, that works very well. A lot of Antiperspirants, you'll get claims like non-whitening. That's because when these metal salts start to dry, it actually leaves this white residue on the clothing. And there's obviously ingredients and film formers that you can add to your product that can prevent this from happening. I don't know if you remember that ad with Nivea, and it had like a black and white kind of container to kind of show you that you can wear completely black clothing and you won't have any of that white residue sitting on the black clothing. Okay, there was just some of the very first ads. Okay, so deodorants, they target body malodor. So this is the difference between an antiperspirant. An antiperspirant targets the sweating itself, where your deodorant is targeting the malodor. So your deodorants will be more like an antibacterial kind of product, or something that's highly perfumed to try and mask the smell. So it targets the sweating that's activated by hormonal stimuli, or apocrine sweat. This is the sweat that's produced gradually and continuously. And although it's smaller quantities that's produced at a much slower rate, you get all of the food that the bacteria want. So they grow very nicely, and then they decompose these ingredients, and then that's when you're getting the odor. So when the body is sweating, it's completely sterile and odorless, but because of the bacteria that's naturally present on the skin, you get this decomposition and odor formation. Okay, so there's several mechanisms that you can use for malodor counteraction. So the first one is going to be bacteriostasis. So that's basically preventing bacterial and fungal growth, so antimicrobials and antifungals. So you're kind of removing the source of the malodor. So antimicrobials that were often used was your triclosan, triglycarbons, antimicrobial fragrance compounds as well. Chemical neutralization. So this is absorbing or chemically neutralizing the particles that are causing the malodor, those chemicals, it's neutralizing them. May cause compatibility problems, so it converts volatile fatty acids into chemically non-volatile or odorless material. So there's quite a few of those kind of ingredients on the market as well, that you can use it in a product that it's got a very bad base odor as well, and it actually neutralizes the base odor of your product so that you can smell your perfume better. And then another one is counteraction. So this is economical to produce, but possible limitations on malodor reduction because it uses this lock and key principle. And because of that, it can only counteract certain odors and not necessarily all of them. I mean, we are all different people. We don't all smell the same. And then another way is fragrance masking. This can be very expensive because you need a very strong fragrance, a fragrance with very specific odors as well. Principally used in cologne, so very high fragrance load kind of product. And another one is temporary specific anosmia. So anosmia is a word that you should have all learned during COVID times, because this is when your nasal receptors are not working. So you're not actually smelling the malodor. So it prevents your nose from actually smelling. Very interesting one. Luckily, it's very temporary, so you're not affecting the people around you permanently. Okay, so active ingredients used in deodorants, they combat body malodor. They have a topical effect only, so they only sit on top of the skin, and therefore they are regarded as toiletries. So hexachloroquine was used from 1942 to 1972, but it was banned by the FDA. Triclosan was your most widely used antimicrobial agent. Sodium carbonate, which is an effective odor neutralizer. And again, the aluminium chlorohydrate and aluminium zirconium chlorohydrate, and they can be used as very, very low concentration, and they still result in a faster kill rate than high levels of triclosan. Also remember that triclosan, you can't go at very high levels either. So if you're going to use that, make sure that you are within the regulation. Okay. Ethanol is another one, so plain alcohol, ester alcohol. It's a principal solvent used in liquid, sticks, aerosols, deodorants. It has bactericidal and deodorant properties of its own. Selected perfume oils exhibit some antimicrobial action and mask odor. So for instance, like tea tree oil, that's a basic one that can help a little bit. And also antifungal raw materials included in products for the feet, like triclocarbon and zinc undersilanate. Okay, they work quite well as well. Okay, anti-dandruff products. So this is now to the scalp. Dandruff prevents this chronic non-inflammatory scaling of the scalp. Okay, it does not exist in children younger, or young children rather. It starts at puberty. It peaks at 20 to 30-year-olds. Okay, people aged between 70 and 80 generally do not have dandruff because they have a reduced skin turnover. You remember from one of the first slides in this lecture where we talked about when your skin ages, it actually grows slower. Your skin turnover is a lot slower. It's reduced. There's also a seasonal variation that's very evident. So you've got less dandruff during summer months than what you do in winter months. There's also an increased production of your horny and squamous cells at the skin surface. So this is something that they found in dandruff, people who have dandruff rather. So where the epidermis actually renewed every 7 days compared to 14 days in normal skin. Okay, but also remember, this is just renewed. This is not talking about how long it takes to move from the basal layer to the top layer of the skin. Okay, so the thing about dandruff, it's you've got this increased growth of the skin and therefore increased scaling at the top of the scalp. Okay, there's just some photos of what it looks like. Okay, skin cells in the granular layer produce both cell cement and keratin, but each is made at the expense of the other. Okay, so there's a direct relationship between the rate of cell mitosis, in other words, at the rate at which cells are produced in the basal layer, and the release of these cells at the stratum corneum. So if it's produced faster in the basal cell layer, it's going to be released faster at the surface. Stratum corneum cells are held together by intracellular cement, and in the desquamation zone near the skin surface, cells become loose in the preparation of being shed. But because they are being produced so fast, they are actually shed in aggregates of approximately 200 microns in diameter instead of single cells. And that's why you're getting these flakes that's sitting on the scalp. Okay, so there's just some flaky skin. Okay. A possible mechanism for the cause of dandruff arises from irritation of the scalp by fatty acids. So fatty acids is the sebum that your body releases naturally. This is particularly oleic and linoleic acids because this can kind of irritate the skin. And these fatty acids are broken down by an enzyme that's secreted from the yeast microorganism found on the scalp known as Melassasia furfur. Okay, this organism is naturally present. The total amount of fatty acid is dependent on both the amount of sebum produced and the amount of the enzyme present. Okay. So although this Melassasia furfur is a normal yeast, it's always present. Okay, it's normal to have on the scalp. Its population is a lot greater when there is dandruff present. So people used to think that it was the cause of dandruff, but now they're starting to think that you're getting the overgrowth of this Melassasia furfur because of dandruff and not as a consequence of it. Okay, so this increased production in sebum, the increased production in cells is actually giving this Melassasia furfur all the food it needs to grow more. Okay, and then I'm sure it's like this compound effect. Okay, so active ingredient used for dandruff, it's considered effective if your scaling drops by at least 50%. So if you're going to put a product on the market and you're going to say, this is an anti-dandruff product, you need to be able to prove that your product is reducing scaling by at least 50%. So antimicrobials that's used is like selenium disulfide, sulfate, or sulfur, very, very effective for against microbes. So it helps for dandruff. Zinc pyrithium used to be used. This is actually now banned in the EU. So zinc pyrithium is actually a particle. So this is your, you'll remember when you used to buy anti-dandruff products, it was like this blue, light blue kind of slurry kind of product. So these days they're using pyroxam oleamine. I see most of them have kind of kept the blue, but now if you look at the ingredient listing, you'll see they actually use the pigment like titanium dioxide to get that white background to make it that blue color. Okay, pyroxazoline, very effective as well, and you can use it at very low concentrations. Your keratolytics like sulfur and salicylic acid, also very effective. So a keratolytic basically helps the skin to release your dead skin cells, like salicylic acid used for acne kind of products. So you're helping to desquamate the surface, and sulfur works the same way. So, and because dandruff is basically these flakes that are kind of stuck and struggling to get loose, you can see how salicylic acid and sulfur would actually help to alleviate the problem. Okay, so anti-dandruff products can only be classified as cosmetics when it claims to alleviate dandruff. So you're not saying you're curing the dandruff, you're just alleviating it and you are preventing it. You are not saying that you're preventing it permanently, just while you are using it. So it's stated that effective control is dependent on regular use. So it's not a medicine, it's just helping kind of scenario. All right, so be very careful of these claims. You do get anti-dandruff shampoos on the market that are OTC, for instance, and those are your cortisone containing products. So cortisone is a medicinal ingredient, obviously, so that's why it will be a scheduled medicine, and you actually have to go to the counter and ask for it. It's an OTC. So Head and Shoulders is a very popular one. I'm sure you've all heard of that, and I've got some other ones there as well. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about active ingredients. I told you we were going to talk a lot about ingredients today. So here's one, antioxidants. Antioxidants help eliminate reactive oxygen species on the skin, and this also helps to reduce onset of skin irritation and inflammation. And this is the skin irritation and inflammation that is because of reactive oxygen species. That's the inflammation it's preventing or reducing. They help prevent the onset of collagen cross-linking and reduce the signs of premature aging. Vitamin C and E, very commonly used, and you also get a lot of natural antioxidants on the market now as well. These are like your extracts. You know, you get a lot of these, like for instance, green tea extracts got a lot of antioxidants in there. Another popular ingredient, your ceramides, ceramides 3 and 6. They build lipid structures, build on your sphingosines and your they are your building blocks. Chemically, they are very similar to some of your major components found in the intestinal matter, or intestinal, okay, the matter between the corneocytes. So that's the cement that's sticking these cells together as well. Ceramides help to repair your barrier function because they are naturally present in the skin. So if you've got any kind of issue with transepidermal water loss because of a barrier dysfunction on your skin, ceramides work absolutely fantastic. I know they also use a lot of ceramide kind of products for people that are prone to having psoriasis or prone to having any kind of dermatitis or skin kind of issues, because the ceramides just keep the skin's barrier function intact. Okay, so also used to reinforce your epidermal, like I said, normalizing your water transpiration. They protect the skin from external influences as well. And there is often a loss of natural ceramides that can result in atopic dermatitis, and that's why it's often used in these kind of products. I think a popular one right now with ceramides in it is like your CeraVe kind of products that's marketed towards people with dermatitis. Okay, enzymes offer enormous potential, but it's not very easy to work with because they are very, very unstable. So generally your enzymes will come in a powder form or dry form, because the moment you add it to water, it starts to degrade. Okay, so are often used in these kind of powder masks. So you get this little sachet with a powder in it, and then you mix it with a little bit of water, and that makes a mask, and then you apply the mask on the skin. So you're adding the water at the point of use, and that gets the best efficacy out of the enzyme. Obviously, there's a lot of other ways to do it, encapsulation and all sorts of other things. Okay, but the biggest thing about enzymes is you have to be sure that you're not producing any adverse toxic effects upon application. The problem with enzymes is that you might know one molecule that it's effective against, okay? You don't know everything. Enzymes are not always targeted. So that's something that you have to be very careful of when you decide to use them. And when I say they're not targeted, they might not work on one specific area. They might be, you know, working on several different areas. And if you having it, you know, using it on the skin and it's not targeting what you wanted to target, and it targets something completely different, you can have a toxic effect on the skin. Then essential fatty acids. I don't like essential fatty acids generally because they tend to have a very, very strong smell, but they're very effective in skincare products. They synergistically combine with your epidermal phospholipids, and they normalize the lipid layer and improve your barrier function. They visibly improve the appearance and texture of the epidermis, and they reduce water transpiration. Then another one is your oxygen delivery systems. The principal function is enhancing your cell respiration, promoting healthy cell renewal, and this is based on the assumption that oxygen levels in skin decline with age. Okay, so you remember that one of those first slides that where we said you've got less oxygen supply to the skin. The effectiveness of these delivery systems is contentious, however. So glycoproteins and selected enzymes have been shown to accelerate oxygen in skin metabolism. Okay, so the thing is, it's whether or not it works is up in the air. So if you're using these kind of systems, yeah, just make sure that you check its efficacy. Vitamin A derivatives associated with your anti-aging benefits. So this ingredient improves the appearance of superficial epidermis. It normalizes your epidermal thickness, improves the elastic properties of the skin, and it also improves pigmentation disorders, so for age spots and that sort of thing. However, vitamin A derivatives are unstable in the presence of oxygen. Okay, they are very unstable. They often oxidize themselves as well. So yeah, if you're going to use a vitamin A in your product, make sure that you kind of protect that vitamin A from light, from oxygen, all of that. So your best retinol kind of products will be like, for instance, in a little airless container that's not clear, so you're not letting any light or oxygen in there. Okay. Another one is vitamin C. It's an effective antioxidant in reducing the incidence of free radical formation. Vitamin C is often used in skin pigmentation as well because it helps to even tone the skin. It's also implicated in collagen synthesis and in the reduction of UV-induced erythema. And this is because, again, it's a strong antioxidant. So it's helping to neutralize your reactive oxygen species. So you can imagine that it will help a lot in your UV-induced erythema, because when you've got any kind of skin burn or overexposure to UV, you have this overproduction of reactive oxygen species. Okay. Again, formulation instability issues. Vitamin C, you get stabilized forms, which is a phosphate, if I remember correctly, a potassium, not potassium, a ascorbyl cetyl phosphate or something like that. So I'll stand to be corrected. Please don't quote me on this. So that's like a stabilized form of vitamin C. And you generally have to make sure that the pH of your formulation is like close to 7, above 6. And that is the safest space for that vitamin C. And then when it comes into contact with the skin that's got the lower pH, the vitamin C then turns into ascorbic acid. And that's when it's more active in its active, or the ascorbic acid is its active form, or ascorbyl, yeah. You get me. All right. Okay, a lot of natural ingredients, like green tea, for instance, your ginkgo bilobas, they all have a very high flavonoid content. Your flavonoids are also very good antioxidants as well. And they're also going to have similar actions to alpha-hydroxy. So alpha aloe vera, for instance, has got nice soothing anti-inflammatory benefits. Tea tree oil, very good for improving the clarity of the skin, so often used in your acne kind of products. Okay. Then your alpha-hydroxy acids, I mean, this is so widely used. It's still a fantastic product. I mean, you remember from my first lecture, I had that little picture there of Cleopatra that actually bathed in milk. And because of the lactic acid in milk, you know, her skin was nice and even toned and it looked beautiful. Okay, so it's still widely used, especially useful in blemishes and skin disorders that normalize pigmentation. Okay, so that's just a little not a graph, anyway. Yeah. So what I want you to take from this picture is the pH. So you'll see the lactic acid on the top, the pH is 3, and the lactic acid at the bottom, it has a pH of 7. And you can see the activity at the low pH is a lot higher than the activity at a higher pH. And this is because it's an acid. Alpha hydroxy acids, they work is pH dependent. And it's the same for salicylic acid. Salicylic acid is a beta hydroxy acid, but again, it's an acid. So it works much better when you're formulating at a low pH. So, and the take home from this is that regardless of the ingredient that you want to put in your product, you have to make sure that all of the ingredients in your product are happy at the pH you want your product to be. For instance, you're not going to put lactic acid in a sunscreen product because your sunscreen ingredients want a high pH. Your lactic acid wants a low pH. So which one is going to work at the detriment of the other one? Okay, so that's something to consider. Make sure that all of your ingredients are compatible in the kind of base that you want them to work in. And if you're going to have a low pH ingredient in there, don't put an ingredient in there that needs a higher pH, okay? Because there's going to be an interaction and your product is not going to work. Or it's going to become unstable, or it's going to become toxic. Okay, then there's also different skin delivery systems. So today, cosmetic formulators are being challenged to develop efficacious and clearly distinctive topical formulations. Formulations use new raw materials. I mean, there are millions and millions of new raw materials in the market. And sometimes these have profound effects on the skin. I mean, I've seen anti-aging ingredients that just look amazing, okay? An example of these materials are vitamins, new natural and synthetic lipids that mimic those of the human epidermis, and of course alpha hydroxy acid. So synthetic lipids that mimic, I'm sure you've heard the word biomimetic. So biomimetic ingredients, this is the ingredients that mimic your natural molecules in the skin. Okay. To obtain final products with real consumer perceivable benefits and to optimize the sensory attributes of these formulations, chemists are resorting to scientific theories and experimentations that until recently were exclusively the realm of pharmaceutical preparations. And again, be very, very careful here. So whatever you are using, make sure that you're not infringing in pharmaceutical areas. Don't make any claims that are pharmaceutical. Don't use any ingredients that are not allowed in cosmetics that are more pharmaceutical. So be very careful of this. Okay. I mean, for any kind of cosmetic product, you have to make sure that it feels fantastic, it looks fantastic, it smells fantastic. Because before your consumer is even going to think about buying your product, those are the things they look at. What does it look like? What does it smell like? What does it feel like? And if you don't tick those boxes, they don't care if it works or not. Okay. As part of this transformation, special delivery systems that were primarily developed for pharmaceutical products can now be used in skincare. And they facilitate the formulation of labile compounds, labile meaning it's going to be easily changed or interchangeable, and enhance the stability and improve products. And in many instances, the aesthetics of the final product can be improved greatly. Okay. So these kind of delivery systems are like, for instance, your dual emulsion system. So you've got water inside of oil, inside of water, or oil inside of water, inside of oil. So what you would basically do, so you've got two water-soluble ingredients that are incompatible with each other. Okay, so normally you will have to choose one. But you can have a delivery system where you are encapsulating one of those ingredients before you are adding it into your emulsion. And therefore you are keeping these two incompatible materials away from each other, but you still have both of them in your product. So you can have the efficacy of both of them without the incompatibility inside of your product. So that's why you would use this kind of system. Another one is liposome. That's another encapsulation, but you will encapsulate with a phospholipid kind of vesicle or like a multilaminar kind of thing. Another one is microencapsulation, which is a physical entrapment. So you'll have like these little pools or something inside of your product. Microspheres, which is another polymeric entrapment. Nanospheres, which is a biodegradable encapsulate. So, and you get very, very interesting delivery systems. I saw one that was specifically aimed at children to teach them how long to wash their hands. So the product on the outside had one color. So I think it was like a blue bead on the outside, and the inside released of these little blue beads were actually a red pigment. So when they washed their hands, these capsules, these blue capsules broke and it released this red pigment. So it actually made the foam purple. And it was very, very interesting. So you teach the kid, okay, you need to wash until you start seeing purple foam, and only then can you rinse your hands, to try and teach them how long it's appropriate to wash your hands to actually make it clean. So very, very interesting concepts that you can come up with this. I also saw one that encapsulated different kind of pigments that you would suspend into a white base for a foundation. So you've got this white foundation base, but when you applied it onto the skin, you are releasing the pigmentation that's encapsulated, and then you get this pigmentation spreading on the skin. It's another very interesting concept. Okay, so you get some functional advantages. So you can protect fragile or unstable ingredients. You can also increase the mobility and targeting of cosmetic actives and facilitate time released or delayed activity. So when you apply to the skin, you don't have all of that stuff immediately going into the skin. You actually have this slower release that's happening over time. And then also you can have a modified application characteristic. So it can feel like one thing in the beginning, and then it changes as these capsules break, for instance. So you've got, for instance, a light skin lotion, and you maybe have capsules with like a oil release kind of product. So when these capsules break, you've got the release of oil on the skin, and then that can actually change your the feel of the product during use. So very, very interesting things that you can do. Okay, so this is just a table to show you the difference between conventional and controlled release. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Basically to show you that for conventional, you've got a quick absorption, slow contact, or small contact time. So, you know, your frequency of dosing is higher, and you've got a lower patient compliance. So in other words, because you have this huge amount that you're applying directly in one go, you can cause irritation, for instance, if it's an ingredient that might be irritating. Where if you have a controlled release, you have a higher compliance, you get a higher compatibility because you've got the slower release of this ingredient. You don't have all of this huge concentration all at once. So duration of absorption is extended, and the extent of absorption is obviously greater as well. Okay, but you can go through the rest yourself. I think it's very self-explanatory. Okay. Then for topical delivery system, you have to make sure that your product is safe, that you're formulating with ingredients with a good toxicological profile. So an interesting one here, for instance, is I like to use the example of preservatives. So MIT, CIT, those are your isothiazolinones. That you will use for rinse-off products only, and you use it at a small percentage, like 0.05 or something silly. Use it at a small percentage, but you rinse it off, so your level of exposure is less. Okay, so because you're exposed to it less during that time, you can actually use it in a product. You can't use it in a leave-on product because then you're going to cause sensitization. It's not toxicologically safe for the skin to leave it on there. So that's why you have to be very careful with the ingredients that you add. You need to know, is it going to interact with something else in your product? Is it going to be in a situation or concentration that it's a problem? For instance, aerosols. You know, if you do a sunscreen aerosol, and I know sunscreen, you're having a sunscreen in there, the sunscreen's safe for skin application, great, fantastic. But now you're putting it in aerosol spray. Now people are actually inhaling it. Is your ingredient safe for inhalation? What effect are you going to have on the body if this product is inhaled? Because now your level of exposure isn't just the skin anymore. Now it's the lungs. Okay, so you need to know your chemicals. You need to know what you can and cannot do with them. Okay, and where your exposure is going to be. So the objective of topical formulation can be classified into two areas: to modulate or assist the barrier function of the skin, or to administer an active ingredient to one or more layers of the skin or components while minimizing systemic involvement. Okay, so you are helping the barrier function or you're delivering an active ingredient. Okay. Basic requirements, your product needs to be aesthetically pleasing. Like I've said, your consumer wants, it looks good, it smells good, it feels good. Okay. You want to have a prolonged delivery of your active ingredients. You want increased efficacy. These days, everybody wants immediate gratification. So the quicker your product can work, the happier everybody can be. Reduce irritancy. Irritancy is a major concern, especially lately. It's becoming more and more newsworthy, if you will. So, I mean, I'm sure you all noticed that our 24 list of allergens has now moved up to 80 plus. Okay, this is because more and more people are getting sensitized to specific ingredients. More people are getting allergic reactions because of specific ingredients. So you have to make sure that your product isn't increasing irritancy. It should actually reduce it, and it should remain active for the longest possible period. Another one is absorption. So what kind of vehicle is your product in? Is it in a serum? Is it in a wash-off product? Is it in a leave-on product? You're obviously going to have a lot more absorption in a product that you're leaving onto the skin. Okay. Then another one is penetration enhancers. So you can add ingredients into your product that's going to improve penetration. So especially if you want to have your ingredient delivered a little bit deeper into the skin, or it's an ingredient that doesn't penetrate the skin that well, so you might use a penetration enhancer just to facilitate the absorption. This one, again, be very careful. You don't want your product to penetrate too deeply either. Okay, so there's different kinds of enhancers. So your chemical enhancers will be your solvents or your polyols. Solvents are like alcohol, so it literally dissolves the oil in the skin. Polyols are like your glycols, your propylene glycols, butylene glycols, all of those. Your ethylene glycol is a popular one as well. Oleic acid and isopropyl myristate, they work by disrupting the packing of your structured lipids in the Horny layer, making them a little bit more fluid, so you get this increased diffusion into the cells. Ionic surfactants, they interact with your cornocytes and actually allow diffusion through the intracellular route, because, I mean, surfactants kind of like lift your cornocytes up a little bit, so you can have penetration through there. And then our commonly used penetration enhancers like alcohol, ethylene glycol, lactic acid, DMS, surfactants, oleic acid, as well as urea. And that little picture there will actually show you, you get your intracellular route, which just goes straight down. Your trans-appendical route, I don't think I said that right, but anyway, that's through your, like, for instance, your hair follicle. So your hair follicle creates a very nice route to go deeper into the skin. Then your paracellular route, that is your transcellular and your paracellular, that's actually the same thing. So it's going in between the cells to penetrate. Okay. Then occlusion, so occlusive materials facilitate enhanced absorption. So occlusive materials, for instance, petroleum or petrolatum, pet jelly. So if you think about it, you're applying a product to the skin and you kind of scenario where your concentration outside is higher than the concentration inside, and you're kind of forcing it to go through the skin. Then concentration, so simply changing the concentration can alter the activity of an ingredient. Here, be very careful, okay, especially natural ingredients tend to be a thing here. So where it's effective at, I'm just going to give an example, if it's effective at 0.5%, it's very effective at 0.6%, it's toxic at 0.7%. Okay, so just because an ingredient is effective at a certain percentage, increasing that percentage doesn't necessarily make it more effective. Okay, you have to be very careful of that. Sometimes ingredients have toxic levels. Vitamin A is a prime example of that. Vitamin A is actually toxic. At 0.3% in cosmetic levels, it's very effective. It does what it's supposed to do, but the higher you go, the more toxic it becomes to the skin. And that's why your preparations with higher than 0.3% of vitamin A becomes medicinal, because then it has to be prescribed by a doctor, and the doctor will actually tell the person, okay, you can use this once a day for 5 days, or it'll be like taking medication. You'll have specific times that you use it, and for only a shortened period of time. So it's under a controlled, supervised usage scenario. Okay, so be very careful of concentration. Another one is rate control. So this is your encapsulated actives, where you are slowing down your delivery rate of your compound. Okay, and then I've got a little bunny there because there is a lot of development happening at the moment for testing ingredients and products on skin explants, on eggs, on all sorts of other substrates that are not actual animals these days. So you can test the efficacy of your active ingredients before supplying it to the market in ways that doesn't need to have it tested on animals. So that's a very interesting area to do some research in as well, if you're looking at that. And then you'll all be happy to know, again, that this is the end. Okay. So now, if you have any questions that you didn't stop me for earlier, please feel free to ask them now. You can put them in the chat, or you can ask them. Just make sure you unmute yourself before you ask. Oh, come on, people, you're so quiet. It feels like I'm talking to an empty screen.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes. Regarding a certain raw material, like the urea that
Yes.
you referred to. How do you, because it's easy to dissolve urea in water, but if you want to put it in an oil-based system, what's an effective mechanism to do that?
Okay, so urea is best if you're going to use it in an emulsion. I know for food-based products, they usually use like a very heavy cream with a high oil load. So you're kind of sealing it so that you're not drawing moisture from the air. Oh, sorry. You're not drawing moisture out of the skin into the air. So you kind of like creating that seal in it. But I found with urea kind of formulations, it's best to have it in a lotion or a cream or something like that. It can be quite difficult depending on the percentage of urea you add to your product. But I mean, you can have a fairly effective system in like an aqueous kind of base. So if you're using like a acetyl stearoyl alcohol with a cetureth, maybe a glycerol stearate in there, it should be okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, you are always welcome to write your questions down for next week, or oh wait, here's a question. Is there any specific reason for or mechanism of action in using either bactericidal or bacteriostatic agent in antiperspirant or deodorants? Does it depend on the desired strength and duration in odor control? Okay, so if you're going to use it in a deodorant, you can obviously use your ingredient at a smaller amount. So if you use an antiperspirant ingredient like your aluminium chlorohydrate, that you can use as a deodorant at like 4 or 6%. But if you want it to be an antiperspirant product, you can go 15. You could go 15% or a little bit higher. But you have to just research those ingredients when you do add it to make sure that you're not going too much. Obviously, these days, I mean, I remember we had 12-hour control and then 24-hour control and then 48-hour control. It's like that whole thing about you can even skip a day. And for those kind of claims, you do need a larger amount of antiperspirant that you have to have in your product. And because your antiperspirants are generally bacteriostatic or bactericidal ingredients, if you formulate it to be antiperspirant enough to have that 24-hour or so claim, then it's going to be bacteriostatic enough or bactericidal enough. Okay, so it does depend on your desired strength and the duration of odor control, absolutely. Does that answer your question? Okay. Anything else? You mentioned products have to have evidence for any claims that they make for a product, like, for example, skin tone in 2 weeks. Can consumer find the evidence? Okay. So if you are saying that your product does even tone for 2 weeks, you have to be able to prove it, yes. Your consumer can at any time request you to give them the evidence, yes. Mostly the issue here is your competitor. Your competitor doesn't want you to take away from their market share, and then they might actually take a product off the shelf and go like, I wonder if this actually works. And then they go to the Advertising Complaints Commission, and then they come to you and tell you, wait, you said this and this and this. Show us your proof. And if you can't have the proof, they take your product off the market. You have to recall everything, and that's a huge monetary loss, as well as losing faith in your company. Your consumers will lose faith in your company. So it's best that if you're going to make that claims, have it substantiated before you even do that. Because if anybody questions you, you can say, but yeah, here's the proof. That's just, you need to make sure that you are covered. Okay. So for these kind of testings, you have to send it to a laboratory. You can do it yourself if you follow the testing standards. Please don't ask me where to find the testing standards. I can tell you who to contact to get them, or who to contact to have your product tested. If you want to send me an email, I can give you that information. But yeah, the best is just have it done, and have it done right from the beginning, and then nobody can question you. And if anybody has any issues, you can go like, well, here's it, here's all my documentation, here's everything, and you are safe, and you know that you are safe. Any other questions? Okay, well, you still have me the week after next as well, so if you want to write any questions down, you can email it to me, or you can ask them next week as well. I don't have any issues with that. But if there isn't anything else for tonight, I hope you all have a very good evening, and I'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Enjoy.